Hey dudes, I was scouring the old Usenet posts by Magic players before 1996, and one card just kept coming up. Post after post were made talking about this card. Some say it's broken, some said it's overrated, and some just question what you're supposed to do with this card. So I thought it might be fun to look at this card and some of the posts about it, and maybe figure out if this card was good or not because I honestly forgot this card even existed. Today, we're talking about Enduring Renewal. Enduring Renewal is a white enchantment that costs 2 generic and 2 white mana. When you play this enchantment, you must play with your hand revealed, and if you would draw a card, you must first reveal that card, and if it's a creature, you must discard that creature. If a creature would be sent to the graveyard from the battlefield, you instead return that creature to your hand. So Enduring Renewal is obviously an interesting card, but it does seem like it could be a confusing card. There are a lot of posts that were just asking questions on how this card even works. So let's look at some of those before we form any opinions on this card. This post, for example, was asking about the interaction between Enduring Renewal and Living Lands. Living Lands is an enchantment that turns all forests into 1/1 creatures, and this poster is wondering if your forests come back to your hand if they are destroyed while Enduring Renewal is in play. It turns out they do, or at least they did. I don't really keep up with modern rules as much as I probably should, and I didn't want to pore through the rules on an interaction that probably hasn't come up in a tournament since 1997. But on November 21st of 1995, lands that are enchanted into creatures go back to your hand because the effect triggers while they are on their way to the graveyard, not while they are in the graveyard. That's pretty cool. It's pretty obvious there's at least something to Enduring Renewal. I will admit, it doesn't read super powerful to me. But I had forgotten this card even existed, so I don't have any play experience with it. There are obvious infinite combos with this, and we'll get into those, but this seems a little slow to me. However, it's a little early to be forming an opinion, so let's look at another post involving Enduring Renewal. The next post has another fun interaction that came up with the card Balance. Balance is an amazing little sorcery that for 1 and a white makes both players equalize the number of lands, cards in hand, and creatures by sacrificing down to the lowest number. I can see where the confusion comes into play. Depending on how everything is resolved, couldn't the player sack their creatures just for them to be put into the hand and balanced away? It seems plausible, but if you read the card, the effect is organized as lands in play first, then cards in hand, and finally creatures. So balance actually works pretty nicely with Enduring Renewal, since your sacked creatures just hang out in your hand where they can be cast again. That's pretty neat. We're starting to get a decent idea of how this card functions, but let's check out a couple more examples. In this post, someone brings up the interaction between Enduring Renewal and a card I hadn't heard of, Krovikan Vampire. Oh wait, I've seen this art. I just forgot about this card, I guess. Anyway, Krovikan Vampire is a summon vampire that costs 3 and 2 black with a power and toughness of 3/3. At the end of a turn in which any creature is damaged by Krovikan Vampire and put into any graveyard, put that creature directly into play under your control. Treat the creature as though it were just summoned. If you lose control of Krovikan Vampire, or Krovikan Vampire leaves play, bury that creature. So I suppose I can see the confusion, but even without looking too deep into the rulings, it's pretty obvious that Enduring Renewal triggers as the creature goes to the graveyard, and Krovikan Vampire doesn't trigger its ability until end of turn. So the creature would be back in their hand before the vampire even had a chance to look at the card. Which was sort of the consensus of the post. Someone just said that conflicts like this go to the player whose turn it is, which I don't think that is true. In the Alpha rulebook, there is a section on determining a solution to such a quandary, but that solution is you either both agree, or you agree to flip a coin about it, or the game is a sudden draw. This post is a lot later than Alpha though, so I don't know where this rule interpretation came from. The rest of the posters pretty much agreed that Enduring Renewal gets priority in a situation like this. Okay, so the last one is kind of obvious, but this question is about Enduring Renewal and Wrath of God. The confusion stems from the line on Wrath of God that says creatures destroyed cannot be regenerated. Or rather, it discusses the term bury and how it means no possibility of regeneration. But Enduring Renewal has nothing to do with regeneration. The text box doesn't mention regeneration at all, and it doesn't regenerate anything. It takes cards that are currently creatures and puts them into your hand, so you will get each creature you own that was destroyed by Wrath of God. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Enduring Renewal and some of the ways that you can combo and abuse it. The cards that show up the most often when talking about Enduring Renewal are Ashnod's Altar, Ornithopter, Fallen Angel, a Tog, Soulnut, Fireball, and Rocket Launcher. So, there are a few different ways of abusing this in 1995. And there's a lot more now, but we'll focus on the past for today. When I look at this card, I do think the best combo is probably a Fireball or Rocket Launcher with an Ashnod's Altar and an Ornithopter. But honestly, this combo doesn't seem that good. It's really funny, but pretty much every iteration of the combo requires at least 4 cards as far as I can tell, and the loop is relatively easy to interrupt. If you counterspell their creature they need for the loop, then it hits the graveyard without hitting the battlefield, and then they just lose their creature. It is pretty resilient to anything that destroys a creature once it's on the field, but you can use enchantment removal like a disenchant to just deal with the Enduring Renewal. This combo is fairly slow, even by 1995 standards. I can see something like this ruining an FNM, but I don't see this combo doing well at tournaments. Decks that oppose this will either throw a wrench in the combo with counter magic, or they will have enchantment removal, or they will be a faster deck that's already killed you before you can get your combo pieces together. But I'm not the only one who thinks like that. I found this fun little post from November 11th of 1995 that has this to say. Eric, please post a deck that is so overwhelming with ER that it requires changing the rules. I bet your deck is not that strong. The best argument for changing ER is that when it does win, it wins in degenerate fashion. ER decks smash slow decks and weak decks, but in my limited experience, and I've experimented with ER a lot, an ER deck tends to lose to many kinds of competitive decks before it can set up a loop. It is easy to design an ER deck that has literally hundreds of 3 and 4 card combos, not counting the specific mana needed to support them. But all cards in an ER deck do not work with all other cards, and it does take time to set up your combos. In the meantime, your opponent may be doing damage that you perhaps cannot afford to block, or disenchanting your ER, Ashnod's Altar, etc. In a typical 3-duel match, an ER deck may win one of the 3 when the ER player was down 1 point to 19 and everything looked hopeless, because a combo falls into place. ER is fun to play with, but I think there is no killer ER deck out there yet. If there is, please post it, and let's be done with this card. P.S. When people were bitching that Jester's Cap was much too strong, I asked for people to post decks to prove it. There were no takers that time either. The main argument for restricting Jester's Cap is that it makes duels take too long. The more things change, the more they stay the same. People will argue on the internet over cardboard until the heat death of the universe. It's funny finding out people thought Jester's Cap was busted. I might have to dig up some posts on that to see if I can find any. Jester's Cap is a pretty interesting card to say the least, but this is about Enduring Renewal, and somebody actually had the balls to post their Enduring Renewal deck list on the internet to be critiqued. So here I am, 30 years later, ready to comment on the competitive viability of this list in 1995. like some type of tool. Anyway, onto the deck list. Oh yeah, they do state that it doesn't have a 100% win rate, which makes sense. Few decks are that busted. But they do claim it's strong, though they also admit they aren't a tournament player. So let's look at this deck list, shall we? We have 4 Crimson Kobolds, 4 Kobolds of the Keep, 3 Crookshank Kobolds, 4 Ornithopters, 4 Enduring Renewals, 3 Resurrections, 1 Celestial Prism, 4 Ashnod's Altar, 3 Iron Stars, 4 Alabaster Potions, 3 Meteor Showers, 3 Fireballs, 2 Disenchants to get rid of Circle of Protection and Forethought Amulets, 3 Pyroblasts to deal with counter spells, 4 Plateaus, 7 Mountains, and 10 Plains. Okay, so the first thing I notice is that it's a 66 card deck. So right off the bat, we could cut 6 cards and be better off. He said the deck did well, but I get the impression he played in a pretty slow meta, because there isn't any way for the deck to search or filter at all. He just needs to naturally draw Enduring Renewal. The deck also runs too many creatures that don't do anything. Redundancy in a list like this is important, but if you don't draw one of your Enduring Renewals, then this list just seems like it's a fish out of water. I suppose you could win by burning your opponent out while chumping them with your creatures, but that would take forever with just land drops and a couple sacked kobolds to an altar. I don't really think this deck has legs. I'd probably cut at least 7 of the kobolds, probably cut the Alabaster Potions and the Resurrections and the Iron Star and the Celestial Prism as well. Get some good cards in there like Wheel of Fortune, maybe Howling Mind for some cheap card advantage, but at least some type of artifact card advantage if you don't want to add blue or black. Balance and Wrath of God would also be super good in this list, as would Armageddon and Stone Rain, maybe, now that I'm thinking about it. Either way, I don't think this list is great, but it's far from the worst pile of Magic cards I've ever seen. There's at least a conscious idea and plan for this deck, and when this guy says he wins a lot, I believe him. Considering that most decks in 1995 were literally just every card a person owned, this list is honestly pretty sweet if you consider it that way. I don't think it wins tournaments, though. Oh yeah, quick aside. I didn't dig through every tournament report I could find to see if they mentioned Enduring Renewal, but I did look through a few, and they didn't mention that card. I'm not shocked, honestly. But I do have one more deck list to talk about quickly. This is TR's Fast ER deck, and he wrote out a bit of a primer, so I'm going to read that out to you before we begin with the deck list. This is my Fast Enduring Renewal deck. I'm going to talk about it a bit, and then show the exact list of cards at the end of this note. I'm not a master deck builder. I'm sure others can improve on this, but I have managed to make a rather fast deck with ER, and it's quite nasty. I'm posting this note to Dot Rules as well as Dot Strategy because it's relevant to the issue of what to do about the card. People tend to feel that since an ER deck is slow, its awesome power is not significant. I'm getting rather close to upsetting that point of view, I think. The expectation is to win 2 out of 3 duels on the 5th to 8th turns. I know that's kind of slow for a tournament type 1 deck, but work in a few pricey oops and it will be even faster. You'll have no difficulty thinking of antidotes that kill this deck, but it is quite exciting to play. The challenge in building a good ER deck, I think, is focus. There are so many things you can do, but you don't have room for them all in one deck. The demonic consultants also require focus. You don't want to use them to call for a card if you only have 1 or 2 of them in the library. This deck may still not be focused enough. I'm thinking about removing the Fallen Angels. The key cards are 4 Enduring Renewal, 4 Ashnod's Altar, a Demonic Tutor, and 4 Demonic Consultations. This means that the deck has 9 cards that can get you an ER and 9 cards that can get you an Ashnod's Altar. So you are generally getting both of them out quickly. It takes nerves to play the demonic consultations, but it's not nearly as scary as I had expected. Your library will be depleted, but the duel will be over long before that matters. To make the DC work, there are many 4 of a kind and 3 of a kind in this deck. I sometimes use the DC to get white mana, which is often the last holdup of getting ER out. The deck's main combination is to sack an Ornithopter or a Kobold over and over to build up a big Lava Burst or Disintegrate, but there are also 3 Fallen Angels that these cards can be sacrificed to. The FAs can conceivably deal a death blow or be used with Swords to Plowshare to get a lot of life. The Swords to Plowshare, Disintegrate, and Lava Bursts provide a lot of defense and can even be effective in holding off a weenie deck until the ER is in play. Often, judicious use of these spells early in the duel enables you to keep an Ornithopter or Kobold safely in your hand until you can get ER on the table. You will note that there are no cards in this deck to make an attacker unblockable. Desirable as these cards are, I drop them to focus the deck. The direct damage spells have some potential to clear the deck for the Fallen Angels. However, since they can remove regenerating creatures. The land tax provides a little insurance against being mana bound, and the Pure Laces can be used on a red direct damage spell if the opponent has a Circle of Protection red in play. Animate Dead is a key card in an ER deck, since you cannot draw any creatures once ER is in play. It also combines with the direct damage spells to give you a chance to grab a big monster from your opponent. It's interesting to think about adapting this deck to a Type 2 format, but I have little incentive. Hardly anyone in my neighborhood plays Type 2. Here's the deck list. 4 Ashnod's Altars, 4 Ornithopter, 1 Soul Ring, 1 Mana Vault, 4 Enduring Renewal, 2 Pure Lace, 1 Land Tax, 3 Swords to Plowshare, 1 Demonic Tutor, 4 Demonic Consultation, 3 Fallen Angel, 3 Animate Dead, 4 Disintegrate, 4 Lava Bursts, 4 Crookshank Kobolds, 12 Multi-Land, 4 of each of Badlands, Scrubland, and a Plateau, 3 Swamps, 3 Plains, and 3 Mountains. So those are some pretty insightful thoughts. Focus was a giant issue for most decks in the early years of Magic, and while this deck tries to stay focused, it still kind of struggles. I would replace the Pure Lace with Disenchant, since Disenchant just deals with more problems than just a Circle of Protection. I also think I'd cut 2 Lava Bursts or Disintegrate for 2 more Disenchant. I agree with his plan for having redundancy, but I think it's a bit much. I also don't think that the Animate Dead does that much in this list, but I guess I don't hate it. You could cut the Animate Dead and the Fallen Angels, though. Maybe you leave the X spells alone, cut the Animate and the Fallen Angels, and add a couple more Kobolds and maybe a second land tax. But maybe you get away from the basic lands and the land tax and instead go to a City of Brass and Mishra's Factory route with the land base instead. I don't know, but I do think this list does show promise. It's cool to see the history of people learning how card games work. There was only one comment on this deck list, and it said this: "Impressive. Good thinking on the strategy with this thing. I'd say its worst enemy would be a deck with a fair amount of blue and a good sideboard. The counterspells and red blasts might put a damper on you, due to the few number of spells that are actually used to pull off the kill. And if it's fast, it might kill you before you can set up a second combo move. Of course, you're pretty safe from power sink, smiley face." I kind of agree with this comment. I do think that the main problem with this deck is that it is too slow. I don't think you can really make an Enduring Renewal deck that's actually fast enough to compete. And considering how little we hear about this card these days, I think that probably turned out to be true. It's funny to think about how cards are perceived, and how they actually do. But any card can be good or bad, depending on the cards around it and how people play the game. Enduring Renewal is a fun look back to a time when the game was less understood. But anyway, that's really all I have for you today. Enduring Renewal was an interesting card that inspired the imaginations of many Magic the Gathering players. But it's so wild to me that people gravitated to this in a set with Demonic Consultation, Brainstorm, and Necropotence. People are funny sometimes. But thanks for stopping by, and if you have any hot takes on Enduring Renewal, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. I'm sure this card is hilarious in the right commander deck, and it's pretty cheap, so maybe it's worth a go for you. But again, thanks for stopping by. Hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you have a magical day.